All right, I want to welcome everybody to February's Zero Waste Task Force meeting. My name is Courtney Williams. I am the founder of WAS, Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. So glad you could join us all tonight. And we do want to jump right in on time because we have with us Senator Pete Harckham, who is my senator here in SD 40. And he's going to give us an update on critical legislation in Albany that can affect our fight for zero waste here in Westchester. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, but feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves. And I'm going to hand it over to Senator Harckham.
Courtney, thank you so much for the invitation. Great to see everybody here. Thank you all for your activism and your concern about these really crucial issues, especially as landfills are closed throughout New York, which were never an environmentally friendly way to dispose of waste anyhow. It's really critical that we really take a systematic look at how we dispose of our waste. So I thank you all for everything that you're doing. Couple of quick updates. We had Chair Glicken, who's my counterpart in the Assembly, we had back-to-back public hearings in October on both the extended producer responsibility bill, which Deborah and I carry, and the bottle bill, which I know is of concern for you. So I believe Senator May was working on some edits to the bottle bill. We're in close contact with her, obviously. Chair Glick and I just made this week some additions to our bill, the extended producer responsibility bill. It doesn't materially change anything dealing with any of the targets or goals or any of that stuff. It was really more in response to feedback we have gotten. Part of this process is I have met with literally scores of stakeholders, both people who are for the bill, against the bill, people who want to see it done but want changes. So the two changes that we made were, number one, we heard from agriculture that the $1 million threshold was just too low. And even just because you have $1 million in sales in agriculture, the overhead is so high and the margins are so low. We heard the same thing from small business owners from the city in Long Island. So we increased the threshold from $1 million in sales to $5 million. We don't think that's going to materially impact too much the amount of tonnage, but I think it will lessen some of the opposition from ag and small business groups. And then the other thing that we did was we made people who are covered under the bill, i.e. food packagers, people in the waste and the recycling industry, they can now apply for existing New York State tax credits if they have to buy new machinery. I'll give you an example of why we did that. I was visiting a paper mill in Syracuse, and what they do is they produce 100% recycled cardboard stock that they then sell to boxing companies. But in the bill, when we talk about secondary and tertiary packaging, things like the boxes for large-scale things like ovens and refrigerators, up until now, you've had to put virgin content in those boxes for strength. And they said, but there's now a new machine in Europe that can do this with 100% recycled, and it's strong enough. And they said, but it's expensive. And I said, how expensive? And they said $450 million expensive. So, if we want folks to do the right thing, the least we can do is try and make it a little easier. So those are the two changes that we made. I think Chair Glick actually passed it out of her committee today. We will pass it out of the Senate Environment Committee at our next meeting. We're off next week, but the following week we have a meeting, so we'll pass it out of committee then. I don't think anything's going to happen on it during the budget. So, if things go sort of quiet, don't worry. We're just going to be focused on the budget until April 1st. We've got a lot of work to do there. And then after April 1st, boom, we got to come out of the gate, gangbusters. With the bottle bill, as I mentioned, Rachel was working on that. I think she and Deborah Glick, who has the bottle bill in the assembly, they have different versions, so they've got to get together and work out those issues. The one thing we're doing in the short term, and we heard loudly and clearly at both our public hearing in October, and we also heard at the NCON budget hearing last week, was that the redemption centers are in dire straits. Over 100 have closed in the last year, and if we want the bottle bill to work, we have to have a healthy redemption center ecosystem. So Rachel May has kind of like pulled out the parts of the bottle bill that just are for the health of the redemption centers. And I'm going to try and get that through my committee again at our next meeting. We want to at least be able to shore up the redemption centers first, and then, we'll continue working on the bottle bill. And then the other thing to report is the public participation plan from Win Waste that we've been bugging DEC about. At your request, we wrote to DEC about the public hearing. They agreed with all that. They deemed that Win's application was incomplete because they didn't have the public participation plan worked out. We've been in touch with both Win and DEC. DEC says they believe that Win is working in good faith on developing the public participation plan. So if we hear more about that before they roll it out, we'll let you know. But just know that we're on top of that. So those are kind of like the few couple of developments on this subject specifically. If there's some broader things, we're happy to talk about that. DEC just did their waste study, and certainly in that, and you talk to the commissioner and the folks at DEC, they do want to do some kind of extended producer responsibility. The governor, we know, does. They have a different approach, so we suspect there'll be some negotiation, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as we protect the core tenets of what we're trying to do. So let's, first things first, let's get it out of committee, then let's see, with your help, we get it to the floor, and then we go from there and deal with the governor. But we thank you. I know a number of you have been participating in reaching out to representatives and some of the legislative education briefings, and so we've just got to keep up the momentum, and we put a lot of shall we say gentle off ramps, not exclusions, because people came to us, and of course every industry wanted an exclusion, and you can't change a system if you exclude parts of the system. So, we said to folks that if we're not going to give anybody an exclusion, but if there are things that we can do to make it easier for you to comply, for instance, the commissioner of agriculture we met with, and he said farmers are really worried because they have strict FDA packaging requirements. And so we wrote in the bill that nothing in this bill overrules FDA requirements. And if you can't meet FDA requirements with what we're saying in the bill, then you got to do what you got to do to meet FDA requirements until such time that the technology is available. The whole piece about chemical recycling and peristalsis and the definition of what's recycling, we know at some point that technology's got to be a part of this. But I at ExxonMobil's invitation went down to Texas to review their plant, and just the very basis of how they do it is in violation of New York's climate law, because they use the heat from the refining of the coke, which is the heaviest and dirty as part of the oil. So how could we justify plastics, quote unquote, recycling that is based on furthering the refinement of fossil fuels. That just flies in the face of our climate law. So right now, that is not in the definition of what recycling is, but we said the legislature would review it every 3 years. I think that's kind of a fair compromise. Come back to us in 3 years and prove the technology works, prove the technology is climate friendly. They haven't been able to do that yet, but at some point, maybe there'll be another technology that works. So these are the kind of things that we put in the bill to try and be reasonable, but without making exceptions and still sticking to our guns on what we're trying to accomplish here. So that's my 2 cents. Happy to take a couple questions if you want. I know you've got a chock full agenda, but it's always great to be here and always great to see you.
Well, we're so glad you were able to make it. We had a couple questions about the redemption centers. So one was, what does that mean? Like, does that include the grocery store machines where you can redeem? And why were they closing?
They were closing because they have not the share of the nickel that they were getting has not grown in like 20 years. And so, imagine all of us living on the same salary that we had for 20 years. So it would be giving them a larger share of that to meet inflation and increase costs. So that's primarily the reason that they've gone out of business is New York State is just not paying them enough for the work that they're doing. And then I know there's talk because one of the things redemption centers have not been able to get is those machines into their centers. They're in grocery stores and other places. They've not been allowed in redemption centers. And some of these machines they want because it would add to their productivity. So I'm not sure if that's in Rachel's short-term bill, but I think it's in the larger bill.
Great. I think that was all the questions from the chat. Let's see, one more question and then we'll let you go. And so we can move on to ours. Regarding new pro-housing community program designation, we include environmental recycling piece into this new designation. Can there be any environmental inclusions?
Well, this is a construct of the governor. This was not an act of the legislature. So I wouldn't even say it's an executive order. It's kind of just executive policy. So unless we are passing a specific law to deal with that, which we could, I suppose, but there's no place. It's a little weird. It's a little amorphous. There's no place where this is like written down in statute any place. So one of the things that we hope to do during the budget, which we tried last time, is to negotiate a comprehensive housing deal with the second floor. So it would include a lot of different things, and we were very close at the end of last year. And so we will, that's our plan during the budget. So, if you have suggestions on that, like that, please get them to me. I chair the Senate's, we call them budget tables by subject matter. It's environmental conservation, energy, housing, parks, and ag. So, that's exactly what we're working on now. So if you have any suggestions, please get them to us.
Okay, thank you so much, Pete.
Thank you so much. Great to see you all, and thanks again for everything you're doing. Greatly appreciate it. Have a great night, everyone, and a great meeting. Thank you.
You too. And for everybody, our action items tonight are to support Senator Harckham and the others that are advocating for this bill. So just if you hang through with us, at the end, we have simple action items that you can do to help make sure that these bills, the bottle bill and the Packaging Reduction Act, get passed. So with that, I'd like to jump into the rest of our program. We've got some presentations, or I've got a presentation to do tonight. And then at the end, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. So feel free to use the chat, but because we've given this kind of presentation a bunch of times, I'm hoping that by the end of the presentation, we'll have covered a lot of what questions might come up. So we'll ask folks to just hold on to that until the end, and then we'll go through the questions if they're not covered. So we've got a lot of new faces and names here tonight, which is great to see. So a little intro on what is WAS. So WAS stands for Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. And we are an alliance of community organizations from Westchester County working to close the Wheelabrator Westchester trash incinerator in Peekskill, where the county's trash is burned. So we already did item number 1 on our agenda, which is the legislative update from Senator Harckham. Now we're going to move into our teach-in on our waste system here in Westchester. And then, as with all of our meetings, we're going to end with action items so we can get this done. So to just give away the crux of this whole presentation right at the very beginning, I urge you to remember the 3 Ps. So why is incineration bad? So 3 Ps, it harms people, the planet, and our pocketbooks. So this incinerator is the largest industrial air polluter in Westchester County. Westchester gets an F for air quality from the American Lung Association. The pollution doesn't know to stay here. So this affects everyone in the county, but it is especially hard on the residents of Peekskill. And we see increased rates of health problems that science has linked directly to air pollution. So we know this is exacerbating the health impacts for Peekskill residents. It's bad for our planet because the emissions from Wheelabrator contribute to climate change. It is the largest industrial source of greenhouse gas emissions in the county, and incineration is the most detrimental way to dispose of waste, especially if we do our job of getting organics like food scraps out of the trash. And then last but not least, it's bad for our pocketbook. So nationwide, incineration is the most expensive way to manage waste. And our incinerator just turned 40 years old. The average age that an incinerator is retired in the US is, I think it's 26 years old, 24 years old. This is 40, okay? It's not gonna last forever. Even with upgrades that they have done, it is still not operating with the best technology available. And to upgrade it with that technology would be millions. And it's important for us to know that, our county really does have a say in Wheelabrator because the Westchester County Industrial Development Agency holds the air permit for Wheelabrator to pollute. And the county contracts with the wind waste facility to burn our garbage. So we have a say in that. Our county government is making decisions about this. So if something happened, if the incinerator failed, we'd be helping to shoulder the costs of fixing that. And we'd be in a situation of having to dispose of the 2,000 tons of trash that we send there every day. And the other thing to keep in mind is that investment in zero waste solutions are long-term and self-sustaining. So while they will require an initial layout of funds, it's not like this massive piece of infrastructure that we need to maintain. So that is the take-home message of tonight's presentation. But I'm hoping to cover more of the details in the next few slides. So a lot of people are like, you're talking about zero waste. What is zero waste? And I can't imagine us ever getting to absolutely zero waste. And usually nobody means absolutely zero. But the idea is that the idea of zero waste is the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning, and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. And a lot of experts in zero waste, their goal is to get to reduce waste by 90% so that there's some manageable 10% left over. So we're in Westchester County. Where does our trash go? 76% of the trash burned in Peekskill is from Westchester County. So both the county municipal waste district, as well as private haulers throughout the county, bring garbage to the trash incinerator in Peekskill. We also get a significant percentage from Connecticut, Greenwich, Connecticut, and we might have some folks from their zero waste effort on with us tonight. We get a little bit from Brooklyn, and we get a little bit from Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, and Rockland counties. And then what happens? Well, first of all, we get the air emissions. And while we like to think that, oh, you burn it, like it's gone, it goes into the air, we're done, that's not true. Depending on who you ask, between 10 and 30% of the weight of what is burned is turned into ash. So that is not only like the ash that you think of in a fire of what is left over after the burning, but in order to reduce emissions, they spray other chemicals and things like that into the smokestack to try and capture those harmful pollutants. And that solidifies and goes in and is mixed with the ash. So all of that awful stuff, and I'll show you a slide on it, that gets emitted into the air, that's a fraction. The rest of it gets concentrated into that ash, and it has to go somewhere. And so to give you an idea of how much waste, in 2020, Wheelabrator burned over 650,000 tons of garbage in Peekskill and produced over 150,000 tons of toxic ash. So in its lifetime, Wheelabrator has generated over 7 million tons of ash. 4 million tons is in the Sprout Brook Frit Pit, which is an ash landfill that was closed in 2011. And there's a picture of it on the right. And so if you have ever taken your kids to play there, say on the playground that's in the image, there's ball fields there, there's a stream, it's very lovely. The enormous mountain that abuts it, that is the toxic ash, 4 million tons of toxic ash that is stored there. And you might be thinking to yourself, wow, it's called Sprout Brook landfill. That is because the Sprout Brook runs right there, and it then runs right into Peekskill's watershed. So that massive mountain of toxic ash, any runoff from that could potentially affect Peekskill's water supply. They capped that landfill. It got too big for them to keep using. Now we send all of our garbage to create another environmental justice community, this one in Putnam, Connecticut. And the residents there do not want it, and they are fighting a massive expansion of that landfill so that they don't need to keep taking this toxic ash. And it's important to know that the trucks carrying this ash pass right through downtown Peekskill. And that is because the town of Cortland was able to get New York State to ban heavy trucks on the Bear Mountain extension during the day. So during the day, all that truck traffic can go through right through downtown Peekskill carrying that toxic ash. So for those that don't know, Peekskill is in northern Westchester. Our population is predominantly Black and brown. We have a lot of immigrant folks living in Peekskill. And on the left, I just want to read you this one paragraph from the environmental justice audit that was done by Clearwater and New York State DEC. It's from 2010, I believe, but it really captures what Peekskill has been dealing with for a long time. Neighborhoods within a 12.5-mile radius of downtown Peekskill are home to at least 2 hazardous waste handlers, 7 hazardous waste facilities, 19 solid waste facilities, 27 major and minor air polluters, 87 industrial surface water sites, 20 municipal surface water sites, 15 toxic release facilities, 47 hazardous waste handlers, and 23 toxic release sites. The majority of the toxic release sites, hazardous waste, solid waste facilities, and wastewater facilities are located in predominantly African American communities. The health data from Peekskill, it shows that our residents are feeling the effects of this environmental racism, of putting this kind of polluting infrastructure in our city. So we have unusually high rates of asthma, of ER visits and hospitalization for respiratory problems, for cardiovascular problems, and a high incidence of low birth weight. And these are things that are linked to air pollution in the scientific literature. It is very clear. So Wheelabrator, this is a slide from the Peekskill Herald, and they do this, so you can look up the great article, great coverage from the Herald, but this is just for one type of emissions, so nitrous oxides. And you can see the green piece of the pie, that is our trash incinerator. That is for the whole of Westchester County. So you can see it is a large proportion of nitrous oxide emissions, and that's just one of those emissions. What are some of the others? So this is data from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The polluters are required to measure a subset of air pollutants and report those emissions. And so that's where we've gotten these data. Westchester County has 7 major air emitters, so that require a Title V air permit from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and from the EPA. And so what you can see here are the emissions data from 2017, as well as the health effects and the rank in the county. So meaning in 2017, what rank was Wheelabrator in terms of how much pollution was being emitted? And you can see it's in the top 3 for all of them. And it is number 1 for many. So global warming pollution, those nitrogen oxides, I showed you the pie chart, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, lead, mercury, cadmium. These are all things that over the past 40 years, Wheelabrator has been pumping into the air here in Peekskill, and it has been spreading throughout the Hudson Valley and Westchester County. Just to show a single snapshot, this is the data from 2021 from the New York State Department of Health. What they're looking at here, the red bar is the rate of emergency room visits for asthma per 10,000 people in the population. And so you can see that is 100 ER visits per 10,000 people for Peekskill. For the whole of Westchester County, that number is only 58. So it is almost double the rate in Peekskill than the rest of the county. If you look at New York State, excluding the city, we are 60% higher. If you look at New York State as a whole, we're 25% higher. So, in effect, you can think of this as, in order for Westchester County to have clean air and not have to deal with the trash themselves, they're passing that problem and those health effects on to the people of Peekskill. And it is also important to know, and maybe you heard the senator mention the air permit, the Westchester County Industrial Development Agency is actually the permit holder for Wheelabrator for the wind waste facility. And that Title V air permit expired in December of 2021. So, and I think Sandy Gilliff is on the call with us right now, our former assemblywoman. She joined Senator Harckham years ago now to call on the DEC to hold a public hearing on the renewal of that permit. And we are all still waiting for that. In the meantime, Wheelabrator is allowed to continue emitting pollutants based on its expired permit. That is legally allowable. So what facilities in Westchester are major emitters that require these kinds of permits? Everywhere you see a star is one of these permits, and I've listed them on the left. And I think probably what you can see is that Peekskill area has several, Yonkers has several, and then in italics are permits that are expired. So actually the county's permit for the Yonkers wastewater treatment plant, that expired many years ago. I think it was 2019. But Peekskill's other major emitter is the BASF chemical plant, Sun Chemical Plant Peekskill. Their air permit expired in 2017. That company made $15 million last year, and they have an expired permit and have been operating on that expired permit in Peekskill. So this really is an issue of environmental justice that our Black and Brown communities are languishing. And it's not just in Westchester, it is across the country. So this slide, these data are from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And what they show is that Latinos in America are exposed to 63% more air pollution than average. Black Americans, more than 56%. White Americans are exposed to 17% less air pollution. And that is because we are choosing to site these kinds of polluting infrastructure in communities that are predominantly minority. New York State recently undertook a process to really understand what communities are being the most harmed, so that as we address the climate crisis, we can make sure to send monies their way. And so to figure that out, New York State came up with this disadvantaged communities criteria. And it is, I'm showing you a screenshot from the interactive map, but what they tried to do is measure the characteristics and vulnerability of a population, as well as the environmental burden and their risk of climate change. Because, you know, if you think about temperatures getting warmer, if you have quality housing, you have money to pay your electric bill, you can run your air conditioner and you can stay healthy despite bad air quality and high temperatures. But if you are living in substandard housing, you are burdened with your energy bill, you cannot afford it, maybe you can't run the air conditioner, you have to leave the window open, the air quality then affects you more directly. And also, if you don't have access to healthcare or money to pay for medications, things like that, you're at a much worse disadvantage. And so when the state came up with these criteria, what they found was that that is my census tract where I live, that dark purple one, that is Peekskill. Not the whole of Peekskill, but a portion of Peekskill that includes the trash incinerator. And when you look at the environmental burden that myself and my neighbors are facing, we are worse off than 98% of census tracts in New York State. And when you look at the population vulnerability, so how well equipped the folks living in that census tract are to deal with the consequences of this environmental burden, we are worse off than 84% of the census tracts statewide. So we are really burdened and we are facing the health consequences of it. If you look on the left-hand side where it talks about health impacts and burdens, you can see some of those same health consequences that I mentioned on the earlier side and how high Peekskill's numbers are relative to the rest of New York State. So while we might think of this as a long-term problem for climate change, this really is a health emergency for the people in Peekskill. So right now, this is what we have, right? This is our waste system. You take raw materials, you make something, and then you throw it away. And we do that to the tune of 2,500 tons a day. What are we throwing away? So let's go through this pie chart. And I want you to think for each one of these pieces of the pie, can we divert that? Or does it have to go in the garbage? Paper, we recycle. Metal, recycle. Plastics, some we can recycle, a lot we cannot and do not. And that's what our action item is for tonight, to stop making those plastics. Glass, recycle. Yard trimmings and food scraps, those can go to compost. Textiles, Westchester just launched a textiles recycling program. Wood, no need to send wood to burn at the trash incinerator. And then that measly 10% that's miscellaneous. So while it seems like, oh my gosh, like over 2 tons of garbage a day, that's an insurmountable problem. When you look at it this way, this is from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Actually, Westchester County already has programs for diverting 90% of what we're throwing away and sending to the incinerator. We just need to scale them up. So really, it is not the insurmountable problem that it seems like. So what we need to get to is this zero waste economy, where you start with less raw materials, you produce it more cleanly, you make sure people can reuse it, can repair it, it can be recovered and go back in as the raw materials for the next round of production. And you reduce that 2,500 tons down to just the 10% we'd like to get to with the zero waste paradigm. And hopefully that's 250 tons that we don't need to dump on some other community and leave them to bear the health and environmental burden of it. So say you don't care about air quality, you don't care about public health, you don't care about the planet or environmental justice, you just care about your pocketbook. Well, it's not good for your pocketbook either. So nationwide, incineration is the most expensive way to manage waste. This graph is outdated. Just note your axes, it ends in 2004. Things have changed since then, but I didn't have a good graph to represent that. But by and large, it is still expensive to incinerate garbage. And a big chunk of that is because incinerators are such expensive equipment to operate, and ours is old. So actually, I need to update this slide because it still says 39 years old, and Wheelabrator just turned 40 in January. So we need to be preparing for the end of the lifespan of this incinerator and act for the public health concerns that Peekskill has and really move away from this. So bottom line, trash incineration is not green, it's not clean, it's not sustainable, it's harming Peekskill residents and everyone in Westchester by contributing to poor air quality. It's expensive to burn garbage, so why are we still doing it? Is burning trash really the only option? If we don't burn it, what are we going to do? Well, that is where this zero waste hierarchy comes in, which is, even if we just sent everything to a landfill from a climate change perspective, there's data out there that would be much better than burning it in terms of emissions, especially if we get organics like our food scraps and yard waste out of there. But I am not in the business of making other communities environmental justice communities, and I don't want to be dumping our garbage on some other community. So the senator mentioned this, like about changing the system, and that really is what we need, because it is not a personal moral failing to make garbage. I make garbage. Everybody here makes garbage. We live in a society, in a system that relies on trash generating garbage. So that's why we need to change that system. And we have programs already existing in Westchester County. Sustainable Westchester has a zero waste program for participating municipalities. And we had a big win at the end of 2023, which is in the Westchester County budget. We got $90,000 for a zero waste consultant. And that is thanks to many of you on this call advocating for that. That investment of $90,000 could be parlayed into a roadmap for us to get off trash incineration and have a much more sustainable and just waste system. And we do need to remember, while Peekskill is dealing with the brunt of this problem, it is not the responsibility of Peekskill to solve it for the county. It's our shared responsibility. This is what our county government thought up as a solution for our waste. And now it's time for all of us to come together and think up a new system that doesn't sacrifice the health of our neighbors or of our planet. Lots of benefits of moving towards zero waste. It saves a lot of money in the long run. It creates good jobs and leads to stronger, more vibrant economies. It protects public health. It brings environmental justice to communities like Peekskill, and it really mitigates the climate crisis in terms of those greenhouse gas emissions. And these are factoids and bullet points pulled from other communities that have made this switch. So it's not just like that Westchester is going to be the first one to do this. We have lots of examples of other communities that have made this change. So what's our solution? Step one is sounding the alarm. And that's what WAS has been doing. And I put that green check mark because we hired, the county is putting out the RFP this month for a zero waste consultant that's going to study our waste stream and make us a roadmap to move to zero waste and end incineration. We really need to push the county that the bare minimum goal has to be to not renew Wheelabrator's contract when it expires in 2029. And we really need our county government to just make that commitment that we're going to close the trash incinerator. So we've been sounding the alarm. The next step, put out the fire. We need to work towards zero waste things locally. We can't always wait for the county, but we can do things on a local level. We can seek short-term alternatives to really help address that health crisis that Peekskill's facing. And then the final step, rebuild the system. Build a just system using zero waste solutions, reduce our waste to sustainable levels, and end the trash incineration. And as I said, this plan is built off of what other communities have done and gone before us to accomplish. So this is most certainly doable. So to close, Remember those 3 Ps, the people, it's bad for people, the planet, and your pocketbook. And now for our take action part. So you can pull out your cell phone and snap that QR code with your phone, or I'm hoping Caitlin or Ellen or Lila or somebody with WASP can drop that Beyond Plastics link into the chat. You can also click that way. This action item for the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, that is what Senator Harckham was talking about. And this really gets at the thrust of the problem. We are not going to recycle our way out of this situation. We really need to stop producing plastics. And let us all remember, plastics come from fossil fuels. That is what fossil fuels are, the raw materials for plastics. So, for a lot of reasons for our climate, we need to get off of plastics. So I encourage everyone to follow that link, and we will drop it in the chat again. There is a script there. Call Senator Stewart Cousins, call Assemblyman Hasty, and urge them to prioritize passing this Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act so we can get on this path to reducing plastic waste. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and take any questions that people might have. So if you want to go ahead and raise hands, or I will also look in the chat. Let's see. Judy, I think your question was for the senator. Will the governor approve passing on recycling responsibilities to manufacturers? I mean, that's kind of our job, right? So like to make sure that she does and put that public pressure onto her. And Mayor Armacost put in some info on the New York Conference of Mayors, who are supporting the bills that the senator recommended. Let's see. Does Peekskill have a town/village composting service, which was added in Yorktown by Matt Slater? Yes, we do. So we have our food scraps effort, and I think some of my fellow Conservation Advisory Council members from Peekskill are on here. We started food scraps recycling. We have a drop off at our DPW garage, and we're working towards expanding the hours because right now it's just Saturday mornings and it's not enough. There's a high demand for this. And I know from other communities as well. So we do want to expand that outside of just the Saturday mornings at the DPW garage. And Sue, yes, mentioned good news from Hastings on Hudson. Now, if we can just convince Spano and Yonkers, yes. So reach out to him and help push for that. Richard asked, is all ash toxic? They don't separate. Well, I don't know if you mean all ash like from my campfire, or you mean all ash from the trash incinerator. So maybe pop into the chat. I mean, I don't know that activated charcoal is important, right? It absorbs, helps
the
absorb.
ash that you were talking about. I'm listed as Richard. I'm not Richard, but the ash you were talking about, I was from the incinerator.
Yes, so it is all toxic because they don't like separate out the components. It's kind of a big gamish of a whole bunch of different things. And frankly, they only test for a subset. But when I toured it, they made sure to mention PFAS is in it. So there you go. So it is not good news. Sprout Brook is monitored. Peekskill CAC members are working with the DEC on that monitoring. And when they were making that plan, we made sure to let them know that the frit pit was there. And then Jan, who's on the CAC with me, asked, do you know where information on the leachate testing of runoff from Sprout Brook could be found? I do not. Maybe Elaine Kokoma, our chair, might know. Let's see. What do we do instead with the trash? So what is the environmentally safe? I mean, let's see, Jessica was asking, what's like the safe way to dispose of our waste? The safest way is to don't make waste. So, like your food, like foods, thinking of it as waste kind of devalues it, right? So like if you're throwing away metal as waste, it's like it actually is a raw material. You can use it. So you either want to divert that stuff to keep it as raw materials, or you want to just not use it in the first, like with plastics, you want to not use it in the first place. But so hopefully I covered some of, like, textiles recycling. That takes the textiles, turns them into something else. Glass goes back, makes more glass. Metal makes more metal. And you heard Senator Harckham talking about the cardboard can be made into more cardboard. And then Barbara asked, who is working on solving this? And any education about composting, beverage trash, plastics, etc., to the community. So WAS has an online library. We have these zero waste task force meetings every month, and we're in our second year of doing it now. And we have had info sessions on plastics, on composting, on single-use foodware like straws and forks and all that kind of stuff. So we are working on solving it, but a lot of folks are. Beyond Plastics is, and I know the county is making steps on all of these things. But I think that's where we really need to change the system, right? So education is only going to go so far when people, show up to pick up their takeout, get home, and it's just full of plastics cutlery that they don't want or need. So we did pass a single-use foodware ban here in Westchester County to stop that from happening. So a lot of orgs, Beyond Plastics, WAS, Sustainable Westchester are working on doing this. And certainly if you have a community group and you'd like a WAS volunteer to come speak on any of these issues, let us know. Let's see. And a link, John is asking for a link to the slides. Yes, we will make those available. Stats are very helpful. Excellent. So Judy is asking, Judy Zinger, why is Peter McCart not putting his shoulder to replacing incineration? I think Peter McCart would say he is putting his shoulder to that. It might be me kind of holding it there, but he is aware of this issue. We have lots of meetings. He knows where we stand. He knows about the shortcomings. He was very involved and is very involved in issuing the RFP, the request for proposals, for the zero waste consultant. So he is working on that, but he is, while he is key advisor, he's not the sole decision maker. And that's why, we need to make sure County Executive Latimer, Deputy County Executive Jenkins, and our Board of Legislators know that this is something we want changed. That's how we got the funding for that, is by people showing up at hearings, sending letters, like really making sure our elected officials know. Let's see. So Jessica Sullivan was asking about public education in schools and things. The best resource that we have found for schools and zero waste is one of our alliance members, We Future Cycle. You can Google them, We Future Cycle, and they specialize in helping schools go zero waste with much success. Our children do not have, are not so set in their ways that they take this kind of thing up very readily. Yeah, so Margot Shepard was asking, is it true that Westchester residents are currently advised to put styrofoam packaging materials in the regular kitchen garbage? And yes, there's not a way, as far as I know, to recycle it. So where else are you gonna put it? And this is why, it's like, you're like, it's really, really hard to be zero waste, because how are you gonna get there when everywhere around you is generating garbage? Let's see. MJ is asking, has that zero waste consultant been hired and started tackling the problem of materials being wasted? Not yet, MJ. So the RFP, the request for proposals, is supposed to go out this month. And that process will be underway. So we continue to monitor it, and we really want to make sure, and I know a lot of you have already emailed the county executive, but more of you can, thank them for the funding, but then reassert that we really need a certified zero waste consultant for this, not just any consultant. We need a commitment to zero waste and shutting down this incinerator. So that is what we continue to advocate for, is make sure that now that we have the money, we don't just assume it's going to work well. We want to make sure we stay involved. Margot, you have a question?
Yes, until Wheelabrator is closed, and also the burning of and the use of single-use plastics, et cetera, is discontinued. In order to prevent things like styrofoam and plastics being burned, which just so greatly increases the toxicity of the ash, should we be instructed to put styrofoam in bulk pickup instead of being advised to put it in with the kitchen trash?
I don't know the answer. Caitlin, do you have any idea? Or Ellen, any idea about the alternative? I don't know, like, I don't know where the bulk waste winds up.
Supposedly the landfill?
There is, the landfill is capped in Westchester County. It's my understanding is that everything goes to, anything in that waste stream goes goes towards the trash incinerator, except for the toxic ash that is part of the process of incineration, and that toxic ash is then removed and is shipped to a landfill. So I would say try to avoid either using or purchasing things with styrofoam. I know that's a hard thing with certain kinds of food packaging. That is an issue. And understand that animal proteins, fish and meat often come with a styrofoam package, that wherever you can avoid it.
Yeah.
It is problematic. At one time they were going to accept it as part of the recycling stream, but it is not a recyclable item.
I think nobody knows. I'm sorry, Courtney, but people, like, even in like the Buy Nothing groups where people are really trying to keep stuff out of the garbage, the catchphrase is save this from the landfill. Like, people don't understand that everything is being burnt. They think, okay, it'll be, in some junkyard somewhere. They don't understand that everything is being burned. And I think that could be corrected. I mean, that could be a public information campaign to let people understand that there's no such thing as a landfill anymore in Westchester, and that it's all being burned.
Yep, and we had our local Buy Nothing, the Peekskill Cortland one, join us in December. So we are, we're working to reach folks, and this will send around the link to this presentation, the slides, as well as the YouTube link to the recording. Share it on Facebook, share it with your friends, share it with your elected officials so they know. And it is really hard. Every time I throw something away, I know I'm going to breathe it. So I am like cognizant when I put something in the garbage where it is going. And what I just remind myself is I could kill myself trying to not throw stuff away or live my life trying to avoid all possible garbage, but I would not accomplish as much as I accomplish with advocacy to change the system. So it is not a personal moral failing to make garbage. And you dedicating your time to changing the system is a much better use of that time than fretting and bending over backwards to try and stop making all garbage. That's kind of how I approach it.
Thank you.
Jessica Sullivan had a great comment in the chat. How nice would it be to get a zero waste pledge pressure campaign to become community corporate partners in zero waste from corporations in Westchester? That would be amazing. And if you would like to help us make that happen, maybe Caitlin or Ellen could drop in the chat. We're going to our core group is meeting tonight after this meeting, and we'd love to invite anyone with these kinds of good ideas that wants to help us implement them. Hop on over with us to the meeting and, share your ideas with us and how you can work with us to make them happen, because we are, all volunteers. And so we always want the help. Sue, you have a question, Susan.
I was just saying, good on you for keeping this going. I was just going to share something just eye-popping. Our co-op in Yonkers just spent not hundreds, but tens of thousands of dollars because of a sewer backup. And when they had a call, it went into people's apartments, ServPro had to be called. And this is just to echo the idea of people have no idea where trash and sewage goes. So anything we can do to educate people, and I think we're going to have a presentation, kind of what you just did, because when they came, they found plastic bags that had been put in toilets, plastic bags, and flushable wipes, but they're not really flushable, and disposal and diapers. And it was just, my co-op board is actually pulling their hair out. So I think maybe we need to do so much more basic education. And here we're doing composting right in our building. And we still have people who are just clueless about where trash goes. So sorry to share that with everybody, but let's keep going because, it's so important.
It is. And you guys are making great strides down there. I'm sorry to hear about that. That's so tough. It's shitty in many ways. So Jane asked a question, how much does the county spend each year operating the wheelabrator? And I don't know the answer. I think, so it's operated by Wind Waste. I forget how, it's probably Googleable if someone goes on, like we renewed our contract. So we pay them, like we contract with them to run the incinerator. So I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a number I should have, handy. So Jane, thank you for asking that. Janice asks, how do they decide what goes in the landfill and what goes in the incinerator? There is no landfill. It's just all, like, our garbage goes to an incinerator. That is it. I think there might be some construction and demolition debris, maybe some private carters. So everything from the municipal solid waste district, which includes most of the communities in Westchester, goes to the incinerator. Some other private haulers could make a deal to take it somewhere else, like over to Bridgeport, Connecticut, to the other incinerator, or potentially to a landfill. But those are private haulers that would be deciding to take those things there. So odds are, if you throw it away in Westchester, whether it's with a private hauler or on the curb for your municipality to pick up, it is going to the trash incinerator. Keiko asks, will the zero waste consultants start with a Westchester County waste audit? The only numbers I've seen are New York State. So good question, Keiko, and I hope so. But Westchester County is supposed to have a solid waste management plan that is supposed to be available online on the DEC's website, and they are long overdue for having it. And it was just not available, and they were way overdue. It was recently updated to say that DEC has provided them with comments. I believe that audit kind of information would be in that solid waste management plan. And that is one of the things I hassle Peter McCart about frequently. And I know Caitlin and others have reached out to Lou Vitrone and others at the Department of Environmental Facilities asking for that kind of information. Let's see, then a good link from MJ about an event coming up in April. Thank you, MJ. Maybe I could ask MJ to email that link to WAS so we can share that info. waspeakskill@gmail.com if you would, MJ. Thank you for that. Yeah, so Margot's saying, I regularly use the composting drop-off in Yorktown. It's open 24/7 and I love it. That is great. I want Peekskill to follow their lead. So I'm going to be telling Peekskill electeds that case. And Barbara says the composting facility should be available at all times. Yes, I agree. Let's see. And then please show the link again. So Judy, I'm not sure which one you wanted, possibly the one Caitlin posted right under. MJ said it's only waste if you waste it. And that is truer words from Pete Seeger. Let's see.
So
Barb,
just for whom to contact, your own senator and assembly person, or only Stuart Cousins and Hasty?
Right now it's focusing on Stuart Cousins and Hasty because as the leaders of their chamber, they're the ones that kind of control when it comes up for a vote. So we want, like Pete was saying, it's going to come out of committee. Then we need those key people to put it up for a vote.
Great, thank you.
But it doesn't hurt to check if your senator is supporting it. And if they're not, get them to, or co-sponsor it, Let's see. Barbara asks, what happens to paper pickup in Yorktown once a week? Now I wonder. You are right to wonder because if you Google Yorktown waste situation, you had recently a debacle with that new waste hauler, and they were actually fined by the solid waste board in Westchester for not properly putting recycling the recyclables. They were just, I think it's like 21 tons of recycling missing from Yorktown that never got to a recycling facility. So likely was just sent to Wheelabrator and burned there. So definitely, and there is, if you Google like complaint Westchester County waste hauler, there's a form you can fill out. If you think something's amiss, you can report it and the county will follow up on it. Let's see. Ellen mentioned food scrap recycling could be required as part of source separation laws, and that is true. And I have a feeling that might be something that a zero waste consultant may recommend, which is mandate it and make it, and then like pick it up on the curb like you do recycling. Let's see. I'm trying to scroll through so many great comments. Janice said styrofoam shouldn't be coming into the state. Isn't it against the law in New York? I don't know. I certainly know, yeah, Barbara's saying cabinetry boxes are filled with styrofoam. I recently had some cabinets put up above my laundry and they most definitely came with styrofoam. And, you know, we banned plastic bags. We're still rife with plastic bags. Like WAS was on, maybe some of you saw, we were on ABC News Live back in May because they were tracking what happens with plastic bags when people put it in the recycling things outside the grocery store. And ABC News put trackers in those bags and then put them in the recycling thing. Ones that were put in a recycling bin in Newburgh were burned here at Wheelabrator. They were able to track it. And of the 40 trackers they put in the recycling bins, only 2 wound up anywhere that could possibly be recycling. And like one of them, they tracked going across the Indian Ocean. So like stuff is not being recycled. We really need to just focus on not generating the garbage. So I do want to check my time. So we are over by a couple of minutes. Still lots of good questions, but I don't know that we're going to get to all of them. And I do want to respect everyone's time. Caitlin put in the chat the link to our core group meeting. That's happening right after this. So we'll end this Zoom and hop on that one. And that's, you know, our core group of people. We meet once a week and we really kind of dig into the nitty gritty. So like when, you know, when we ask you to send an email, we talk about what we're going to draft in that email. We talk about what strategy we're going to use, and we plan these events. So certainly, you know, there's so many thoughtful questions. Like everybody's really thinking about this, and we could use your passion and your expertise to do this work. And I do want to just do a plug for our March task force meeting, which I think is going to be on the 13th. That topic is PFAS. So it's been in the news a lot. It's one of these forever chemicals that your body just doesn't have a way to get rid of. And it's in everything, in a lot of plastics and other things. And it is not one of the 11 things that the trash incinerator needs to test for. But we're going to have experts, scientists, health expert, Patty Wood from Grassroots Environmental Education coming on to talk to us, because there is data that's come out that actually areas around incinerators have higher levels of PFAS. So while they avoid testing for it, it's definitely coming out. And I think that's one of the things that, yeah, I'm surprised I didn't get the question tonight, which is, you know, oh, well, is it illegal what Wheelabrator is doing with the emissions? It is perfectly legal. But let us remember that legal does not mean healthy, does not mean safe, does not mean right. So my day job, I'm a cancer researcher. We know the science is clear that even legally allowable limits of air pollution are harming our health. So we will all be healthier when this incinerator is shut down. And then Judy just had one more question. Judy Welsh, do you have a step-by-step plan to get to zero waste from where we are? I do not. Courtney Williams, volunteer with WAS. Don't tell my husband, I don't have all the answers. I do not have the answer to that. And that is why our primary ask that we accomplished at the end of 2023 was for Westchester County to hire a certified zero waste consultant, a consultant that's going to work with Department of Environmental Facilities, review everything, and come up with that plan. Because we did not get this system built with volunteers, right? Corporations and county government worked for years to set this up. Courtney Williams is not solving it or coming up with all the answers. So it's going to take the experts, and that's why WAS started with that. So with that, thank you all so much for your thoughtful questions, and I'm sorry I didn't get through all of them. But we've accomplished a lot, and we wouldn't have done it without all of you helping out. So we have nearly 400 folks on our task force meeting registration now, and we had over 300 people participate last year, and that is a key factor in how we were able to accomplish what we've gotten done. So thank you all so very much, and have a good Valentine's Day.